And Daniel's quiet life in Willow Creek shattered the moment Michael moved in next door, turning a young wife's hidden loneliness into a deadly secret that would leave their small town gasping in horror. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Anna and Daniel lived in a small blue house at the end of the road, the paint slightly chipped, but the flowers blooming in bright colors around the porch. To the neighbors, they looked like the perfect couple, the kind that shared small smiles and waved at everyone who passed by. Daniel worked long hours at a small mechanic shop on the highway, often coming home with grease on his hands and the scent of oil in his clothes, but he never forgot to bring Anna flowers on Fridays, a habit he had started in their first year of marriage. Anna would place the flowers in a jar by the window and watch the light catch on the petals, letting them remind her that she was loved. Yet, despite these small gestures, Anna felt an emptiness inside that grew each day. When Daniel left early in the morning, the silence in the house would follow her through every room, clinging to her as she washed the dishes and made the bed. She would sit by the window and watch the wind move the leaves, feeling as if the days were slipping away. Without color or purpose, Anna tried to keep herself busy, baking bread that filled the house with warmth and arranging the flowers in careful patterns. She took walks in the small garden, pulling out weeds, touching the petals of her marigolds, and letting the sun fall on her skin. But there was a loneliness that pressed against her chest, reminding her that she spent most days alone, waiting for the sound of the door opening in the evening. Daniel would come home tired, and though he kissed her forehead and told her about the cars he fixed, his eyes were already drifting towards sleep, his mind heavy with the day's work. At night, Anna would lie awake, listening to the crickets outside, hearing Daniel's slow breathing beside her, and she would stare at the ceiling, feeling the distance between them like a cold breeze under the blanket. There was a time when Anna believed that love would be enough to fill every empty space, that the promise she made on their wedding day would hold her through every quiet afternoon. But as the seasons changed and the flowers in the garden bloomed and withered, she began to feel a longing that she could not name. It was as if something inside her was waiting to be seen, to be touched by a presence that made her feel alive. And that need began to grow with every day she spent alone in the small blue house. She watched the neighbors go about their lives, families walking their dogs, children running after each other in laughter, and couples holding hands as they strolled down the street, and she wondered when she had stopped feeling that same warmth. In her own heart, she would find herself standing at the window, looking out at the road, waiting for the mail truck to pass, or for someone to walk by, just to see another human being move, to break the heavy silence that seemed to fill every corner of her home. She began to spend longer moments in front of the mirror, brushing her hair slowly, touching the softness of her skin, reminding herself that she was still young, still capable of being noticed. She would place a flower behind her ear, letting the colors of the petals brighten her reflection, trying to find in herself the spark she felt was fading. In the quietness of those days, Anna began to understand the depth of her loneliness, the emptiness that no bouquet of flowers could truly fill. And in that realization, a small seed of restlessness took root within her, quietly waiting for something to awaken it, to pull her away from the silent routines and the gentle, tired love of the man who had once been everything she thought she needed. The new neighbor arrived on a warm afternoon in late spring, driving an old red truck with boxes piled high in the back. Anna watched from her window, the lace curtain brushing against her arm as she leaned closer to see him step out and stretch, looking around as if he was tasting the air of Willow Creek for the first time. His name was Michael, she would later learn, and he was younger than Daniel by a few years, with sun-tanned skin and a relaxed way of moving that made it look like he belonged to a world that was not weighed down by routine and responsibility. He moved into the small white house next door, a place that had stood empty for months, its yard overgrown and its windows dusty. But within days, Michael had cleaned it, trimmed the grass, and planted small flowers along the walkway, making it look alive again. Anna saw him often in the mornings as he jogged past her window, the light catching on the sweat on his forehead, his breath forming small clouds in the cool air. He would wave to her as he passed, a simple, casual gesture, but it sent a warmth through her that lingered long after he disappeared down the street. She began to wait for that moment each day, standing near the window at the time he usually ran by, telling herself she was just watching the street, just enjoying the morning light, but she knew it was his presence she was waiting for. She started to notice details about him, the way he tied his shoes before running, the way he would stop to pick up fallen branches from the road, the easy smile that played on his lips when he looked in her direction. One afternoon, while Anna was trying to carry a heavy box of old books from the garage to the living room, Michael appeared at the open gate, asking if she needed help. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a nervous flutter in her stomach, but she stepped aside and let him lift the box from her arms. She noticed the strength in his arms, the veins that moved under his skin, the ease with which he carried the weight that had felt so heavy in her own hands. He placed the box inside, looked around the house with a polite nod, and smiled before leaving. But in that brief moment, Anna felt something shift inside her, a crack opening in the wall she had built around herself. After that day, Michael began to find small reasons to come over, offering to help fix the loose board on her fence, or to carry heavy bags of soil for her garden. Anna would make lemonade for him, and they would stand in the garden, talking about the weather, about the plants, about the town. It was innocent, Anna told herself, just neighborly kindness, just a young man helping a woman who spent most of her days alone. But each time he smiled at her, each time his hand brushed against hers while passing her a tool, Anna felt a warmth that made her forget, even for a moment, the heaviness of the silence that filled her house. The other neighbors noticed Michael's presence around Anna's house, but they said nothing, only giving small nods when they saw him helping her with the fence, or when they saw them laughing as they watered the garden together. Anna felt alive during those moments, her heart beating faster, her cheeks warming with color she thought she had lost. She began to find reasons to go outside when she knew Michael was there, checking on the flowers, sweeping the porch, or simply standing under the tree as if enjoying the breeze, waiting for him to notice her. Each day, the small glances and the quiet conversations became a part of her day. She could not let go of a secret piece of light she carried with her as she returned to the quietness of her home. Anna found herself waking up each morning with a sense of restless excitement, a flutter in her chest as she pulled back the curtains to peek outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Michael as he stepped out for his morning jog. She would linger by the window, pretending to adjust the flowers in the vase, her eyes following him until he disappeared around the corner. Each time she saw him wave, a small thrill coursed through her, reminding her that she was still alive, still capable of feeling something that made her heart race. The loneliness that had once wrapped around her like a heavy blanket began to thin, replaced by the warmth of those moments when Michael's eyes found hers. It began with small, harmless exchanges. Michael would wave, and Anna would smile in return. Then he started stopping by to return tools he borrowed from Daniel, or to offer extra fruits from the tree in his backyard. Their conversations were light, about the weather, about the plants in their gardens, about the small, ordinary things that made up the fabric of Willow Creek. But beneath those words, something deeper was growing, an unspoken connection that neither of them acknowledged out loud, but both felt with every passing day. Anna found herself laughing more, her eyes lighting up as Michael spoke, her heart softening in his presence. She started paying more attention to her appearance, brushing her hair with care and choosing her dresses thoughtfully before going outside. She wore light perfumes that smelled of flowers, catching a glimpse of herself in the mirror before stepping into the sun, a reminder that she was still young, still seen. Michael noticed, complimenting the color of her dress or the way the scent of her perfume mixed with the garden's fragrance. Anna would smile, a soft, shy smile that made her feel like a young girl again, someone untouched by the heavy silences that filled her home when Daniel was away. Soon, Michael began spending longer moments with her under the shade of the tree in her garden. He would help her water the plants, passing her the hose while their fingers brushed, sending a wave of warmth through her body. They would share lemonade, sitting on the steps of the porch as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass. Sometimes, they would find themselves sitting closer than they should, shoulders brushing, hands almost touching, hearts beating a little too fast. Each small moment felt like a stolen piece of happiness, a quiet rebellion against the life Anna felt trapped in. As the days passed, Anna began to lie to Daniel without guilt. She told him she was volunteering at the local library or attending church meetings, when, in reality, she was spending those hours in the garden with Michael, talking and laughing, sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden for so long. The fear of being caught was there, lingering in the back of her mind like a shadow, but it was overshadowed by the thrill of secrecy, the excitement of feeling wanted and seen. She told herself it was harmless, that nothing would come of it, that she was simply enjoying the company of a neighbor who made her feel alive. Yet, even as she told herself these things, Anna knew she was playing a dangerous game. She saw the way Michael looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the softness in his eyes, the longing in his glances. She felt her own feelings deepening, the pull of his presence growing stronger each day, making it harder to return to the quietness of her home and the tired love of her husband. She started to sense the risk of discovery when neighbors looked a little too long as they passed, or when she saw a curtain move in a nearby window. But each time she thought of stopping, the loneliness she once felt returned like a cold wave, pushing her back toward the warmth she found in Michael's presence, refusing to let go of the secret that was becoming her escape. The sky was heavy with clouds that evening, the kind that turned the world gray and thick with the promise of rain. Anna moved through the house, her hands trembling slightly as she straightened the cushions on the sofa and adjusted the flowers in the jar by the window. She glanced at the clock, listening to the ticking that seemed louder in the heavy silence of the room. Michael was in the garden, fixing the latch on the gate that had come loose during the last storm, and Anna watched him through the glass, her heart beating with a nervous excitement she could no longer deny. She told herself he was only there to help, but deep down, she knew that what had started as neighborly kindness had turned into something far more dangerous, something that was growing beyond her control. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping gently against the window, as Anna opened the door to tell Michael to come inside before the storm grew stronger. He looked up at her, his hair damp, his eyes soft in the fading light, and without thinking, she stepped aside to let him in. The air between them was filled with unspoken words, a quiet tension that neither could break as the storm began to pound against the roof, the sound of thunder rolling through the small blue house. They stood there for a moment, the scent of rain mixing with the scent of the flowers, and Anna felt the pull in her chest, the longing that had been growing for months, begging to be answered. They moved to the living room, the light flickering as the storm outside grew stronger, and Anna's hands shook as she handed Michael a towel to dry himself. Their fingers brushed, and the touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine. The rain was pouring now, loud and heavy, hiding the sounds inside the house as Michael's hand moved to touch Anna's, holding it for a moment too long. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked into his eyes, Seeing the reflection of her own loneliness and desire mirrored there, the silent acknowledgement of the feelings they had both tried to push away. In that moment, they stepped over a line that could never be erased, the warmth of his hand on her skin, the closeness of his presence breaking through the careful walls Anna had built around herself. The storm raged outside as they found themselves moving closer, the distance between them disappearing as the weight of their secret came crashing down in the form of a single, irreversible choice. The world outside was a blur of rain and thunder, but inside, everything was clear, the silence of the house filled with the pounding of Anna's heart, as she allowed herself to feel alive, even if only for a moment. But what neither of them knew was that Daniel had returned home early, the storm forcing him to leave work before closing, his truck moving quietly along the wet roads of Willow Creek. He stepped into the house, the sound of the storm masking his arrival. As he set down his keys and removed his wet jacket, he noticed the extra pair of shoes by the door, the damp footprints on the floor, the faint sound of voices in the living room. His heart sank as he moved toward the sound, each step heavy, a cold dread washing over him as he reached the doorway. There, in the dim light of the stormy evening, he saw Anna and Michael, too close, their secret written across their faces in the silence that followed as they noticed him standing there. The moment froze, the thunder shaking the windows as Daniel's eyes met Anna's, betrayal and hurt flooding his expression. The room felt small, the air thick with tension as the reality of what had happened settled into the space between them, the terrible truth that could no longer be hidden, the storm outside a mirror of the storm that had now entered their lives, changing everything forever. Anna sat on the floor, her back against the cold wall, her eyes unfocused as the sound of rain hitting the roof filled the silence that followed the chaos. The room smelled of wet earth and fear, the air heavy with the scent of something metallic that clung to her skin no matter how many times she wiped her trembling hands against her dress. The lights flickered with the storm, casting shadows that danced across the walls, reminding her of the moment everything had fallen apart. In the blink of an eye, what had felt like a fleeting escape turned into a nightmare that she could never erase. After Daniel saw them, the room had erupted with a rage so sharp it felt like the air itself was tearing. His eyes, once tired, but kind, were wild with betrayal as he moved toward Michael, his fists clenching, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Michael tried to speak, to step back, his hands raised in a silent plea, but the hurt in Daniel's eyes had already turned into something else, something unrecognizable. Anna remembered the sound of their struggle, the way Michael's body stumbled into the table, the vase shattering, the flowers scattering across the floor, petals torn and wet like pieces of a memory that was already dying. There was a moment of stillness, a single breath when everything stopped. And then Michael fell, the life draining from his eyes as the storm roared outside, drowning out Anna's scream. Daniel stood there, his chest heaving, his hands stained with the truth that could never be hidden. The storm outside seemed to enter the house, washing away every trace of warmth that had ever lived within those walls. Anna could not move, her body frozen, her mind refusing to accept the sight before her, the man who had made her feel alive, lying lifeless, and the man she had promised to love forever, standing over him, broken and shaking. When the police arrived, the lights of their cars flashing red and blue against the wet streets of Willow Creek, neighbors gathered quietly, their umbrellas trembling in the rain as they whispered to each other, their eyes wide with the shock of what had happened in the house they all thought was filled with quiet love. Daniel did not resist when they took him away, his eyes empty as they placed handcuffs on his wrists, the rain dripping from his hair as he looked back at Anna one last time. She could not meet his gaze, her own eyes fixed on the ground, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks, the weight of her choices pressing on her shoulders. The days that followed were heavy with silence. The house felt empty, every room echoing with memories of what used to be. The smell of bread in a once-baked replaced by the cold scent of rain-soaked wood. The neighbors no longer waved as they passed, their eyes filled with pity and judgment, whispering about the young wife who let loneliness lead her into a secret that destroyed everything. Anna would sit by the window in the evenings, staring at the garden where Michael once stood, remembering the warmth of the sun on those afternoons that now felt like another lifetime. She learned that one moment of desire could unravel every promise, that a single secret could burn through a life built on quiet routines, leaving nothing but ashes behind. Daniel remained in a cell, facing the weight of what he had done, and Anna was left in the small blue house, alone with the ghosts of her choices, the whispers of the neighbors, and the memories of a love that turned into a terrible sin under the storm of Willow Creek.